what you've just listened to is probably the most famous donuts in the world. Colin McCrae, Derek Ringer just going over the finish ramp at Chester Racecourse, securing their 1995 World Rally Championship. We started episode 1 of this two-part special with Mark James talking about his coverage of the championship and how it affected his career. And I thought it'd be quite good to reach out to the voices that you know today from the World Rally Championship and also from World Rallycross. So I thought I'd get Julien Porter and I thought I'd get Andrew Coley. First up, Julien Porter on what it meant for his career.
This is Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
For me, the 1995 season was a bit of a strange one, if I'm honest, because I'd just come off the back of a very successful 94 season as a competitor in BTRDA and the BTRDA and the little front-wheel drive Nova that we had. Also, we did the national championship in that Nova, and we won F2 outright in the national championship, beating a lot of two-wheel drive, 2-litre cars, as well as like the 1600s, and then BTRDA, we finished second overall in the championship. Again, won A6 class, and it was kind of like 95 was, in theory, my big step up to the British Rally Championship, and got a drive with Honda. Someone helped us get a drive, Asquith Autosport, and I was like, here we go, we're on our way. And it was kind of like the World Championship it did exist, but it didn't, because I was trying to get the momentum going, and it was like, here we go, right, this is what I'm going to do. And cut a long and kind of like difficult story short, it just didn't work. I'd come out of a Group A Nova, which pulled from a couple of thousand revs all the way up to 7 and things like that, to this Honda Civic that Mark Higgins and Cliffy Simmons had worked wonders in. But the thing just didn't start working till about 7,000 revs, and I just couldn't drive it. Half a day tested Bill Gwyn's beforehand. An accident on the first round in the Vauxhall Sport where I rolled it. Got a bit of a history of that. I've done that twice now. Then Pirelli Rally, I went off again. I think I actually finished dead last, having spent 18 minutes or something in a ditch. And it was just kind of like, I can't compete with this car. And it was something that we ended and basically had nothing to do. So the World Rally Championship became my focus of watching it. But 1995 wasn't like 2020 where you just pick up your mobile phone and look at it. And it was a situation of working for the family business and running back up every couple of hours to check CFAX, page 360, I think it was, 360, and then that was the sport, and then you picked your motorsport, and kind of running back into the house, seeing what was going on, seeing who was winning and who wasn't winning, and finding out those bits of information an hour or two afterwards. And then, well, as for TV footage, that was a week later. So it was kind of all a bit strange and a bit kind of like bizarre that you were always watching it, but from behind. 95 was obviously Colin McCrae's championship winning year. I've got a little thing I got to tell you. I wasn't a massive Colin McCrae fan, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Our family business was a Mitsubishi dealership, so we supported Mitsubishi and the Evo 2s initially, then the Evo 3s that the team had, and Kenneth Eriksson, Tommi Makinen, those kind of things. So whenever I was searching on CFAX and for information, I was genuinely always looking to see how the Mitsubishis were doing, and dare I say it, hoping that they were going to beat Colin McCrae and people like that. So it was kind of it was pure and simply a loyalty thing to, that was the brand that we were selling as a car dealership, and kind of like supporting. And you kind of had met some of the people around the rally team because of our involvement in motorsport. My dad had a Mitsubishi rally car. So Subaru was a massive rival. And to be fair, it wouldn't have mattered who was driving that car. Even though Carlos Sainz is probably one of my favorite drivers in the world, it wouldn't matter who was driving the Subaru or the Toyota or whatever, the Fords. It was there against Mitsubishi, which is our brand. So, and again, whoever drove a Mitsubishi was like one of our superheroes. So it's kind of a strange thing that you were kind of watching it and seeing what was going on, but I was watching it from a Mitsubishi side rather than everyone else's side. And if we're honest, Mitsubishi had a great start, winning in Sweden and things like that. So this was brilliant. And then the Subaru Steamroller just started to kind of like get a bit of momentum with Carlos. Yes, then he got injured, but then Colin came on song. And you were kind of like, yeah, okay, this is a little bit difficult because they're starting to steal Mitsubishi's thunder, and obviously it was helping with the family business. If Mitsubishi in general worldwide were doing well, because they were promoting their rally art brands, which meant we had Evos potentially going to be imported into the UK, which hadn't happened at that point. And there was all this talk for 1996 that Evos were coming. And we were like, they've got to keep winning. They've got to keep winning, because then we might get some Evos into the UK. And yeah, we did get Evos into the UK. And for 1996, well, 3/4 of the way through 95, we decided that we were going to order 2. And we did. We ordered 2 Evo 3s based on the success that they had in the World Rally Championship. And one was it was the height of luxury when you say it now. One was to be made into a rally car, which Steve Hill Motorsport built for us. And then the other one was basically our spares, but it was a rolling spares. It was a car. We recce'd in it and everything. And it was for me to try and get used to four-wheel drive, get used to all that power coming from an Opel or a Vauxhall Nova, as it is in the UK, and then a Honda Civic. So we got this kind of Mitsubishi, and it was based on the success that they were having that Mitsubishi UK decided to import them. Yep, they didn't win the championship, but as a rally fan, as we all know, you always go and watch your home round. I'd been fortunate enough. I'd done my home round of the championship. Only the year before, 1994, I'd led my class and retired in Mid Wales with a double drive shaft failure. 95, I wasn't competing at that time. The Mitsubishi was coming on stream for the following year. But it was all about kind of, let's go and watch it with your mates and things like that. And I remember we travelled the length and breadth of the country, sleeping in the cars like you do, cooking off little gas cylinders and gas stoves in the back of the car, basically bacon sandwiches for breakfast, bacon sandwiches for lunch, bacon sandwiches for dinner, all out the back of whatever cars we were in, Suzuki Jiminy's, Mitsubishi Shoguns, whatever we had. But one of my friends had a Subaru, so he was all fully jacketed up, hatted up and everything, and I was kind of like thinking, oh my God, if you can't beat them, let's join them. And as a driver myself, the aim was always kind of like to get into the British Rally Championship and hope, if you got a factory drive, that you would end up doing a few world rallies. And to do your home world rally was just an amazing feeling. And I remember watching the amount of people out, the traffic jams, the queues of cars getting into stages, people walking for miles and miles and miles. And there was a real massive buzz. And we're in a real prime right now in the World Rally Championship. 17, 18, 19, 20 has been amazing. I still don't think we'll ever touch, particularly in Britain, we will ever touch that week again. Never. It was just unbelievable passion, noise, Sweet Lamb, the fireworks, and the air horns as McCrae came into sight. And you stood there as a wannabe rally driver who'd had a little bit of success but wanted the next step of, I want that. That's what I want. I want to be that good and that famous that I want to come into the Sweet Lamb Bowl and have fireworks going off, lighting up the sky that you could see the car without any spotlights or anything. The noise and the air horns, the cheering. And I was thinking, yeah. And I'd sat out since basically April and not driven a rally car, bar a one-off in September on the Track Rod Rally where I drove the Nissan Micra in the Micra Challenge. I'd done 3 rallies and I kind of thought, did I really want it? That week out with my mates watching it, they were my service crew when I was competing, and they kind of we all agreed that 1 week alone was like, we've got to get back to this, we've got to go and do it, we've got to have this kind of adrenaline rush, and just those moments just that McRae coming through Sweet Lamb down into the bowl, through the water splash, over the jump and all that, you kind of thought, yeah, I want to be there. I want to be that good. I want to be that famous. I want that kind of adulation from fans of just being that talented. It was just quite staggering. I remember we went to the final stage of the rally. We watched the final stage and it was like, how cool would it be to actually get to Chester now? And it was like, it's impossible. No way. Me and my mates decided it was no way possible. But we had someone called Steve Rennie with us. Now, Steve Rennie was basically, his nickname was Prospec. Steve Rennie knew every road of every bit of forestry. We were in the middle of nowhere in the back end of the North Wales forest getting that final stage done. And he goes, we can make Chester. And I was like, there's not a chance. So we all piled into our cars and he found us a way and we stood in amongst the crowd watching Colin do his donuts, getting his trophy. And again, the noise and the passion and the atmosphere, it was just kind of like, yeah, I was there, and it was something that was very, very special and something you'll never ever forget, and something that really did bring rallying right to the forefront, and made Subaru a worldwide name. Unfortunately, they beat Mitsubishi. We did get them back in the following years with Tommi Makinen and people like that, but what a season. And it reignited my passion to go back to rallying, pure and simply because of I wanted to become, or try and become, that good or that famous that you had people cheering your name and things like that. But even just to do your home world rally, when I did it in '96 and things like that, and you see people walking for miles, you do kind of feel, even if you're car 51 like I was, you feel a little bit like a superstar. Nothing like what the big boys feel like, but they gave you something that just made you feel a little bit special. And just want to continue doing it, and that was the British public and a guy from Scotland, a crew from Scotland, Colin McCrae and Derek Ringer.
Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
1995 then, I would have been 19 years old, just doing some quick maths on that, and I was into motorsport. I was already into motorsport. I'd sat and watched F1 with my dad on the TV, and then we'd kind of taken it a bit further, so Dad had taken us off to see some real motorsport. So we'd been to see the Rallycross Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, which was always held in November. I live in the southeast, so that was an easy one to get to, and that was absolutely epic. And we'd also, I'm pretty sure we'd been to see the London International Rally, which was the first rally that I saw in person, and that was Malcolm Wilson on that one. I think it was Malcolm Wilson. They had a Finn as well, and they were in the Michelin Pilot Escort Cosworth. So yeah, I was getting into it, and we were getting into going and watching motorsport live. Obviously at that time you're becoming aware. Yeah, already I had a hero in Nigel Mansell, but you're becoming aware of Colin McCrae. I'm becoming aware of that. I really, although I loved F1 and it was great, I was kind of thinking, actually, I think I might prefer this sort of slightly dirtier cousin of rallying and rallycross as well. Rallycross was my first live motorsport, and of course that's what I do now, but rallying was my first sort of true love. I'd been to see the rallycross, but I really got into the rallying, and so we were going to go up to Rally GB, and we went to the Mickey Mouse stages. Now, with hindsight, I'd love to have gone into the forest. I would have absolutely loved to have gone into the woods. But, I don't know. It was me, the guy who went on to become my co-driver, Tim Slattery. He came with us. We both had we had long curly hair with an undercut. That gives you a good idea of what a sado I was. And my dad drove us up there in his Ford Orion, and it was a proper adventure. I think the three of us shared a travel lodge room or something. And we went to see the Mickey Mouse stages, probably because it might have been our first Rally GB. We might have gone in 94, but I'm pretty sure 95 was the first one. We definitely went in 96 because that was the F2 year where they rotated out the Group A cars and brought in the F2 cars, and that was wicked too. But I know this is about 95, and what I distinctly remember was Chatsworth, and we were stood up. We had elevation. I'm not quite sure. We were close to the water splash. I'm pretty sure the cars came under us and then up behind us again. So maybe in between a lower road and the water splash. Of course, the water splash is where there's that famous shot of Sainz coming through, where he comes in a bit hard and smashes all the front grills out of the Impreza. But I'd spent the year, it was hard to follow, wasn't it, rallying back then? It wasn't quite as easy as it is now. Obviously, I've been reading about it in Motoring News, as I think it was called then. And I'd been using page 360 on teletext. Oh, wow. I was always on teletext. It was ridiculous. You'd refresh teletext more often than you refresh your Twitter feed now. You're just checking whether or not there might be a result in from whatever rally it was on. And it was hilarious when I think about it. It was 1.5 pages. It was probably about 200 words of text, but I'd be desperate through the season trying to find out what the results were. Was McRae in there? Was he winning? How was it going? And the season had obviously been up and down. We'd had the Toyota thing, so suddenly we come to the last round. Well, okay, we've been to Catalonia, and I remember, I'm pretty sure I'd seen that maybe on Top Gear, wherever the report was. I have a terrible memory. Anybody who knows me will tell you that. I've got lots of stuff written down, so I can't remember anything. And I remember obviously the science thing and the team orders in Catalonia, and I remember not being too happy about that. And then it came to Rally GB, and so we've gone up. We're at Chatsworth. Scientists come through, smash the grills at the front of the car. But my overriding memory of the whole thing is just the noise when McRae came through. There were so many fans out that year. Everywhere was absolutely packed. I love seeing the shots in the forest, and that's why I kind of wish I'd gone to the woods. But in the distance, the bark of the Impreza, that wonderful noise, and also back then anti-lag was just savage. Like anti-lag now is not at all savage compared to then. It literally, if the car popped as it came past you, your ears rang. It was like someone had fired a shotgun. It was so basic compared to what it is now. But there was something that was raw about it, and of course it was the way the cars had to be driven. So you had to chuck it into everything. Everything needed a bit of a Scandinavian flick to make the car turn in, and I miss that. That's the one thing I wish they'd do now is make the cars so you have to move them around a little bit more to force them to turn in. And so you'd see someone come in facing completely the wrong way, and they might have faced the wrong way. That whether it used to be 3-4 times on a braking zone, you'd flip the car in, then out, then in, then out, then finally you'd get it to totally broadside, bang, bang, up through the gears, and McRae would appear, and everyone would be going mad. You'd be standing up if you weren't standing up. It's the air horns too. So in the distance, you'd hear the car coming, you'd hear the air horns, and he'd burst into view. Somehow always more sideways than everybody else was, always a bit more committed than anyone else was. And it was a wonderful experience. Chatsworth's the only one I can remember going to. I'm pretty sure we went to 2 stages, but that's the one that I really vividly remember. And then the rest of the rally I would have watched on TV, so I'm sure it would have been Top Gear Rally Report, wouldn't it, then? With the famous music, that one. And it was, again, I'm hoping I'll get all these things right. They were leading, weren't they? And then I'm sure they had a problem with the car and bent the suspension and ended up further back. And somehow came through and still managed to annihilate everyone. Managed to, just the stage times they were setting were ludicrous. Science, I've since read, was blown away by the pace of McRae. There was the famous quote, wasn't there, where he said to Tony, where he said, "No problem, Tony," about whatever pace it was they needed to make up the time. And it was just this wonderful heroic story. He's come there slightly on the back foot due to team orders, which now I'm a grown up, I understand why the team orders are there. They needed to win He's come there on that back foot, destroyed everyone, then had this mad recovery, and I love that footage of them coming through the stage, the last stage where they're coming up to the finish line, and Derek Ringer starts laughing as they cross the finish line. It's a wonderful memory. And for me, it was the inspiration of those cars being thrown around, the noise, and the heroics of McRae. Then the donuts and the top falling off the trophy and stuff. It's just scenes for me. It's such a vivid memory. And I wanted to be Colin McCrae. I wanted to be a factory rally driver, and so I went off and I bought myself a Vauxhall Nova rally car when I knew nothing about the cars at all. My mum said, "We don't know anything about cars." Well, yeah, fair enough. I didn't have any money, so I had to learn about cars, and that went on from the Nova up to sort of national competitions, and then I went on to become a motorsport instructor, and then somehow I've managed to go on and become a commentator. So I never made it as a factory rally driver, but if it wasn't for the likes of Colin McCrae, I never would have become a television commentator, and I wouldn't be commentating on the World Championship Motorsport. So I still made it to the World Championship somehow, and that's 100% thanks to the inspiration of Colin, and I must say as well of Richard Burns. We were so lucky to have two fantastic rallying heroes in the time in which I was growing up, and being inspired by them has led to a lot of the things I've achieved. So I'm very grateful for that. We're very lucky. I wish both of them were still around, because I'd love to have seen either of them in Rallycross. I think it might have floated their boat. Derek might have rung their bell. Would have been great, wouldn't it? But yeah, what heroes. Fantastic.
This is Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
Through the opening 2 days of the event and extends a steady lead over his teammate Tommi Makinen. Outright fastest on 8 of the opening 18 special stages, Ericsson is definitely at home in his home country.
You're 1 second behind your teammate Kenneth. Will team orders apply tomorrow?
I don't have any idea.
That's up to the manager.
We'll see tomorrow.
Oh, I don't know. I will try to stay ahead of Tommi if it's possible, and I think I have a good chance.
Do you think team orders will be put into play?
I don't know.
Well, I don't think we're in a position to give team orders. I mean, I know they've come in here tonight a second apart, and it's, there's going to be a big fight. That's natural, but we'll see how things go in the morning. We'll see what the conditions are like.
The Lancer Evo 3, with its distinctive deep chin spoiler and huge radiator air intake, is making its debut in the hands of Tommi Makinen, 10th overall, and Andrea Reghini. Makinen coming to terms with the new car on unaccustomed tarmac very quickly indeed. Sophisticated new transmission system makes the car even easier to drive on the limit, and Makinen is taking full advantage. But he's comprehensively outpaced by Andrea Reghini. The Italian tarmac specialist certainly knows the way to pedal the new Mitsubishi. Overall at the end of day 2, it's obvious that the rugby-based Rally Art concern have got a potential winner on their hands for the future. It's all the better for the Mitsubishi team because Reghini rolled his car and nearly destroyed it on the eve of the rally in shakedown testing. But notwithstanding that, he's 6th and Makinen's 10th as the rally enters its final stages. Enjoying the highly distinctive Australian tree-line stages. Meanwhile, Tommi Makinen, the flying Finn in the second Mitsubishi, was pushing just as hard, moving up to a fine 3rd place.
1995 was, I suppose, the year where the Mitsubishi effort really started to take hold, and people started to take a little bit of notice, I suppose, of what the Evo was starting to become, and I suppose the rise of Tommi Makinen also. So I thought it'd be quite a good idea to get somebody back on who was with us quite recently. Of course, now he's more famous for being Ken Block's manager, but back in 95 he was very much part of the Rally Art effort, working out of rugby. So I reached out to Derek Dauncey. He's joined us once again, and he talks about his 95 and what was really going on, I suppose, behind the scenes for Mitsubishi at this point.
Yeah, so the 95 season for us was, for Mitsubishi, was quite eventful. We were in the middle of the season. We debuted the new Evolution 3, which was a big step up really in development. The Evolution 2 was a really good car, but on the horizon we knew that we had to do some changes, transmission, engine, and a bit of chassis work, and also obviously Mitsubishi had a facelift of the car, so that came in mid-season. So at the start of the year we really were looking to try and get a result out of Sweden. And we did that, but the actual target was Corsica, which wasn't one of our usual events to debut anything new, but it came on board that Corsica would be our Evolution 3 debut. So starting the season, really interesting year, new regulations in the sport, less servicing. They brought in some ideas of remote servicing, which played into an interest in Monte Carlo with tyre choice and drivers having to pull studs out of tyres on the side of the road and switch discs sizes if they're running a tarmac disc or a gravel disc for snow. So we went into Monte Carlo, all the teams collectively, not really knowing what to expect. It wasn't so clear about how easy it would be to change tyres. So that first event was really a bit of a lottery, and Tommi was a bit of a master on mixed conditions. We'd always normally go for a bit of a gamble on the tyres. So Monte Carlo for us was like our first event with Tommi. That event we ran Tommi and Andrea Ghini. Andrea came on board to do the 3 tarmac rounds, Corsica and Spain and Monte Carlo, and then Tommi was backed up by Kenneth Eriksson, obviously, who was a driver from the previous season. So going into Monte Carlo, we basically came out of that with a 4 for Tommi and a 6 for Andrea. And Tommi really was running as high as 3rd, I think, going into the final leg. And he slipped back behind Juha on that last day, on the last stage, which was unfortunate. He had a bit of a problem with the transmission, which we'd never seen before, carbonated rear-wheel drive. But it was a fantastic event. Carlos winning that event. Colin didn't finish. He didn't finish the first 2 events, which was a great return for him at the end of the season to win the championship when he never bought anything out of those first 2 events. So, it was an interesting first event. And then we went to Sweden, the second round. Not like the current years. We had full snow and ice. It was brilliant conditions out there, brilliant conditions for the test, the recce, and the rally itself. And as I said, we were trying to develop it. We were doing a lot of testing, getting in preparation for Corsica. But Sweden, we came away with a 1-2, and it was pretty interesting event. Even at the end when we actually won it, there was actually team orders applied, and it was very atmospheric in the team to get to that position. Kenneth and Tommi were dominating the event. The Subarus had a problem, I think, with the oil pressure relief valve in the engine, I think it was, and their cars didn't make it to the second morning, I believe it was. And it was pretty special event. We would always take our own tyres to Sweden to a gentleman who used to put our studs in for us, and actually we used to have a special glue, and we really benefited from that on that event. We did a number of years. So Kenneth won the event, and Tommi was second. But going into the last morning, Tommi was literally like a second of difference going into that last morning. And Kenneth was like, they knew team orders were applied that evening. So the order was for Kenneth to win the event and Tommi to back him up. But on that first stage, the last morning, it snowed really heavily overnight, and Kenneth just swept the road. So Tommi took 30 seconds out of Kenneth on the first stage, and then of course we were into trying to manage the situation, which there was actually massive betting taking place on the event, and the people weren't very happy, even with Kenneth being his home event. When Tommi stopped on the last stage for 30 seconds to let Kenneth pass, there was a lot of people that weren't very happy, and Andrew took a bit of stick for that, but the agreement was there the night before, and that's how it stuck. Kenneth won the event and Tommi was second, so that really leapfrogged our season for us, and it was a great motivation knowing that we got the evolution of the car coming along. So that really helped us. Portugal, we never did Portugal that year. We stepped aside and let the Group M boys take over the entry. We actually we were pushing really hard, building cars to try and catch up with the long haul events. So our next event was Corsica. It's a tricky event at the best of times. Again, we brought back Andrea to support Tommi, and unfortunately, on the shakedown before the event, Andrea rolled the car, and we got the car back to outside the hotel where we were working, and it became quite clear it wasn't going to be possible to repair. So we ended up utilising a test car and stripping that overnight, stripping the entry car, moving all the new body panels across, all the cross members, engine, gearbox, dampers, wiring harness, dash, everything came across. So it was a massive rebuild. And luckily, on the event, Andrea was extremely quick, and he rewarded the boys with a third overall. So again, we managed a podium on that event, and that was a debut for the Evolution 3. So we had transmission upgrades, we had an engine upgrade. We'd done quite a bit of work. We'd lightweighted in the car. So we left Corsica leading the manufacturers' championship, which was brilliant for us. So yeah, that was a debut. Everybody loved the car. I thought it's still my favourite car out of all the Evolution models that we did. So leaving France, we ended up shipping everything across to New Zealand. And New Zealand was a tricky event. I mean, going back then, it was 660 kilometres of stages. So, you know, it was a long old 4-day event. So we struggled on that event. We had a few issues with setup, and I think Kenneth finished 5th, and then Tommy had his famous accident where he slid off backwards whilst he was leading. He'd basically set an unbelievable pace. I think he was quickest on the 3rd and 4th stage, and then 7, 8 and 9 I think he was quickest. And on stage 10 there's some discrepancy, but pretty sure that there's a misheard or a misquoted pace note, and Tommy come into a right-hander just too quick and slid off. So we lost Tommy quite early, and we struggled a bit with setup with the cambered roads as well. So we came away from there needing to look at geometry again. It was a good event for him. We always liked New Zealand, but Colin won that event. I think Didier was second as well. So Colin had started to show some promise to make his proper title chance. So we were doing really well in the championship, as in the manufacturers, but that one event made us slip back slightly. So a bit unfortunate. And then we went straight to Australia. Those two events were back to back, obviously from a logistical point of view. So New Zealand to Australia, we made the jump across to there. Did some more refinements to the engine on the Lancer. I remember at that point, and we had some good modifications from Mr. Inagaki, who originally designed the 4G63 engine, and we'd done a small test before, and it was looking really good. And then we actually won the event, and that was probably our catalyst to go into 1996. But the engine mods were a big step for us, and it was a massive fight between Kenneth and Colin. They were literally swapping seconds on the last morning, and we had Tommy in a supporting role. He'd managed to get up to 3rd as well, so we were looking really good. And the last morning, unfortunately, I think Juha again pipped Tommy to the podium after Tommy had hit a big rock and broke the upright, and Trailing Army still managed to bring the car home 4th. But Kenneth won that event, and it was a massive boost for the team. It was such a brilliant fight with Colin. They were all in, both of them, and the 2 long stages, Kenneth just pulled away slightly enough to win the event. So that was really good fight. So we left Australia in really high spirits, and we were going back to Europe for the last 2 rounds. Last but one round was Catalonia, which is a famous event. Everybody remembers some of the Subaru management trying to stop a certain driver because a team order was applied, and the team order thing was I'm never a big fan of it, but we'd actually obviously thrown it into the cattle market on Sweden, and then the fight between Carlos on his home event and Colin. They'd agreed to actually hold station the night before, and I think there was some discussion between Colin and Carlos to keep on pushing. So when they came back in the last morning, it was obvious that they weren't holding team orders, and I think Mr. Spiller and Mr. Ringer are famously seen trying to slow one of the drivers on the stage. So we went to the event. We were quite confident. Again, we got Andrea again. Andrea finished 5th. he benefited from, I think Didier had a problem on the last morning, but we were quite clear with that event that we needed to do some damper work for 96. We changed damper supply and damper direction for the start of the season, but we struggled for pace against the Subarus and the Toyotas at that point, and Delacour. Delacour was really quick on tarmac. So yeah, it was a disappointing event for us. Tommi had an accident pushing a bit too hard, and we struggled with the pace on that one. And then the championship was going down to the wire between Juha, Colin and Carlos, so it was going to be a massive battle in GB. So last event of the season, everybody wound up completely to fever pitch for the event. Richard Burns was a supporting role at Subaru at that point, which he came across to us that following year, so we were watching Richard quite closely. But what a fantastic event, and the unbelievable scenes with Colin winning the championship, and we had a disaster. It was not the way he wanted to finish the season. I think we had a transmission problem with Tommi. We were leading at the end of the first day with super special stages. We had Kenneth and Tommi were leading by a fair bit. But the Monday morning, I'll never forget it, Hampsley Forest, Colin took out 28 seconds from Kenneth and just catapulted himself into the lead. It was the stage. Very tricky event, a very tricky stage, and Colin just dominated it. I don't think he really looked back after that. So we basically, I think Kenneth went off on probably the second day of stage 18 or 19. So we were basically back at home watching what was happening on the last day. So yeah, a good season. It was a fundamental season for us. We debuted Evolution 3. We already knew coming out of GB Rally, we had the Monte Carlo test and Sweden test ready for 1996. So yeah, I enjoyed the season. It was brilliant. We had a lot of success, a lot of stuff that went on in the background that was really, really good. But we were really looking forward to the 96 season.
Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
The Finn with co-driver Welshman Nicky Grist on board was still running well. He set 3 fastest stage times and was holding on to 4th place. Toyota, driven by German Armin Schwartz, was just outside the top 5 too. And on the very next stage, something was obviously wrong with the Toyota's rear suspension. A rock had broken the wishbone, giving the German unwanted 4-wheel steering. But he survived to start the final leg in 8th place, with his teammate Juha Kankkunen 4th and Didier Auriol 5th. Were willing to do anything for a better view of the hero Delacour, who was spearheading the Ford attack. That's an opinion that's been shared by Juha Kankkunen, the flying Finn with Nicky Grist on the maps.
Okay, left. Opens.
An inspired drive by Kankkunen moves him ahead of Auriol in the final stages. He's heading home in 4th.
What was really interesting also about the 95 season was the fact that we had 4 manufacturers, but we also had 2 tyre manufacturers. Now 3 of the teams went with Michelin. Only 1 of the teams went with Pirelli. Of course, that was Subaru ProDrive. Now I'm not entirely sure whether that created a them against us attitude, but I'd be very surprised if that wasn't kind of the attitude that was taken by, ProDrive, Subaru, Pirelli, because obviously all the others were going in a slightly different direction. But I thought it'd be quite good to get somebody from behind the scenes and get somebody who was there again. And the man who was Colin's tyre engineer and the man who was working for Pirelli at the time was Jerry Freeman. And I thought it'd be quite good to get some of the stories from that 95 season from Jerry Freeman.
What do I remember about 1995? Well, it was probably, definitely the best world championship that I won whilst I was at Pirelli. It was a great, obviously, because you've got the home hero, and Colin was a good friend of mine. But it actually started quite strangely. I mean, the first event of the year in Monte Carlo, which is without doubt the hardest rally to deal with. If it was all dry, like most people know, if you have a wet rally or a dry rally, it's relatively easy. If you have a rally that's mixed, wet and dry, it's difficult. If you have a rally that's wet, dry, icy, snowy, and anything else that you can think of in between, uphill, down dale, round mountains, then it makes it so difficult. And I'm sure everybody knows how you have to go and test with this. You go on all the different roads, and so you end up testing slicks on snow, and you test snow tyres on dry tarmac. Anyway, so the start of the year is hard enough. I remember the night before the rally in Monte Carlo, Colin saying to me, should we go and get something to eat? And there's quite a famous place in Monte Carlo. I assume it's still there. I've not been for a long time. Called Stars and Bars. And we went in there, and there was myself, Colin, one of the lads who worked for us, and Colin said, my mate's meeting us as well. So we sat down, and we had a big burger each, and we were generally chatting. And the guy who sat with us was, probably reasonably well known. And in came Monaco royalty, and it was that kind of place, And we got up and we were walking back, and the lad who was with me said, do you know that mate of Colin's? I'm sure I know who he is. I said, yeah, that's David Coulthard. And so it's quite memorable when you get clowns like that with you. But I remember Monte Carlo being very mixed and very difficult, and then Colin didn't finish, of course. Then he didn't finish the next one. Carlos did very well, because one thing you could always rely on with Carlos, he always had it between his ears, and would drive very sensibly. But then really, all changed mid-season when Carlos fell off his mountain bike. Damaged his shoulder quite badly. I think from memory he only missed one rally, but he was badly hurt, and he was so brave when he came back after that, because you could see pain in his hand he was driving. But then it all, Colin started doing very well, and it all balanced itself out. And then, of course, you arrive at Catalonia. I mean, from anybody on the outside, you could probably see that Catalonia, it would have been a very sensible thing just to knock it on the head the way it was, let Carlos win, and then there would have been equal points going into the last rally. And I'm sure Colin would have had the advantage there anyway. But it all became a bit of a malarkey, really, and we were all in the service area waiting for them to see what happened, and a lot of the boys from Subaru went off trying to flag him down, and I thought, good luck with that. I'm glad it's not me. And eventually, everybody knows what happened and all the malarkey. So, I mean, with that, the two most, I suppose, interesting things eventually in the year were the malarkey with Toyota, and obviously, this with Colin and Carlos going into the last round. But I don't know whether people remember, this maybe is a kind of aside, but we used to have terrible difficulty in Australia because of all those little ball bearing things. The cars used to slide all over the place. So the year before, as far as I remember, which, I might be wrong by a year or so, but the year before, we had at Pirelli the K pattern, which obviously, they still have exactly the same today, the K. And we did a test with Armin Schwartz in Australia, and we found this cutting the tyre on the outside made it a lot better on this kind of very loose gravel. So we kind of stuck to this a little bit and tried this outside cut on several of the rallies that tended to be a little bit more dirty and mucky or soft, Argentina and New Zealand and places. It didn't work very well. So Brevio, who is quite possibly the smartest tyre engineer I know, decided that really what we ought to do, instead of having, to cut these tyres every time, we ought to actually make a tyre with a pattern that was a little bit more spaced out. Everybody will know that as the KM tyre. So before the RAC rally, that was the first time we ever tried this new KM tyre. Obviously they were left and right, so, and not having time to make them, we just had lefts as far as I remember. But we tried this tyre. I did the test with Colin, and we went and did quite a lot of testing, and this tyre was obviously in the muck and the dirt that bit faster than the K. So we thought we had a bit of a secret weapon. And the bit that I really remember was going into stage 8, after all the playing about stages on the first day. The first real stage was very early in the morning, and as far as I remember, it was Hamsterley, but it would have been about 17 miles, something like that. And you could see the look. I mean, there were days with Colin where you could have just put a bicycle tyre on his car and he would have won, because he just had it, and you could see it in his face. But we'd had the gravel cars going through, and their report came back, and we said, right, Col, this is it, we use the new tyre. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. This is exactly the situation that we tested in. And Colin said, okay, put it on. So we ordered it, it was put on, and the bit that I really never forget was, as Colin went out to the motorhome, Derek Ringer turned back and walked to me, was quite close to me, and said, Jerry, are you absolutely sure? And I said, yeah, this is what we've done. And he said, because this is our World Championship. And I thought, no pressure there then. So they went into Hamsterley, and give or take a second or two, Colin took 30 seconds off everybody in Hamsterley, and I was proper happy. He really, really went for it. And then, of course, you get the tyre man's nightmare. He goes into the next stage, which was Pundershaw, which was ludicrous length. I think it was about 37, 38 miles, and has a puncture and drops 2 minutes. So from going to 30 seconds faster than everybody in 17 miles, he has a puncture in the next one and drops 2 minutes. So, after that, you just saw the look in his eyes, and he was flat out, and it was really quite inspiring. I mean, for those, whilst he was incredibly nervous and incredibly kind of tense, you kind of just knew, because he just decided he was winning, and that was it. And, from our point of view, I mean, other people's points of view might be slightly different. But, we got to Chester, and that was just fantastic. I mean, a lot of people used to congregate on the podiums at the end and have a big wave, but, that's what I really, really remember. That. And the people there were all just cheering. It was like being at football. It was fantastic. Certainly my best World Championship.
Round 5 of the World Rally Championship, and the teams move down under. New Zealand, for Rally New Zealand. One of the most spectacular events and some of the most spectacular scenery in the world. Twice winner Colin McCrae picks up the challenge from the Maori warrior. The traditional Maori greetings to the contenders for the World Championship. Not around, though, to rub noses is Carlos Sainz, out with a shoulder injury. That means Richard Burns and Possum Bourne will support Colin McCrae in his defence of the double victory. First, Ericsson takes the advantage on the opening state of the day. Then McRae and Ericsson dead heat on the second. McRae takes the third, Ericsson the fourth. The tension is so great the two drivers can't even face one another.
This is Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
I also want to get the outlook of one of my other colleagues from the Absolute Rally podcast, Trevor Agnew. Of course, we sometimes forget he was the 2003 production World Rally champion alongside Martin Rowe in a Group N Pro Drive Subaru. So I thought I'd get his take on 1995 and how important it was for his career, and also I thought I'd reach out to friend of the show, Jamie Arkle, of course, the man behind the Gravel Crew, on Facebook, and he was a very, very young man at the time, but I thought I'd get his thoughts as well. So first up, we've got Trevor Agnew, and then we'll go over to Jamie Arkle.
1995 is strange, actually, because the first part of the year I don't remember that much about it. I remember Colin got off to quite a bad start, and for me that was the focus of the year. It was only when Carlos had his problem later in the year that he was able to catch up. Of course, we all know that one of the first drama-filled parts of the year was in Spain. So two parts to that, I'm sure, will be discussed elsewhere in a special. But clearly we had the Toyota issue with the cheat device, and we had Subaru team orders. And for someone who was such a big Colin McCrae and Derek Ringer fan, I first met both of them in 1988. It would have been on the Circuit of Ireland. I was co-driving Robin Phillips in the Volkswagen Golf GTI. Robin had been part of the junior team the year before, and before the first stage there was a big delay, and of course we had all heard of Colin McCrae. We knew about his exploits at the Sunbeam, so this is the first year that he was driving the Nova, at least certainly a year where he started off in the Nova. I think in 1988 he did 23 rallies and used 7 different models of car in that year. So that's the amount of practice and the devotion that he had. Of course, Derek Ringer was with him all that time, and we didn't get so far in the rally. We stopped in the first stage, but even on the recce we had good fun with Colin. I remember that, and off he went. Then the following year he joined Ford. I think he did 2 years of Ford before starting his 8-year spell with Subaru. So next time I met him then was in 1991. I'd been away backpacking for 2.5 years or so, and I come back again. Robin Phillips was doing Colin's gravel notes, and he asked me to go with him. So on the Ulster Rally in 1991, that was our job. I remember, and it's a vague memory, but I definitely remember at one point when we were doing the gravel notes that we changed a left to a right, and it was in a 6. It was one of his flat-out notes, which I thought was quite bizarre at the time, and I might be wrong, but it's just something that's there at the back of my mind. That we did. He didn't do well in the rally. He had a transmission problem, so that effectively ruled out the British Championship for him in 1991. As I say, he moved off to Ford then 92, he continued then 92, 93 with Subaru in the World Championship, and then of course into that 1995 season. So him and Derek then got into, as it was, a Network Q rally, and the puncture at the start of it was just mind-blowing. You know, the fact that it was in Pundershaw, 40 miles long, and lost all that time. But of course he'd won the rally the year before. He knew that he was faster, and he clawed it back to the finish that we had in Chester, where I think every one of the 2 million people who attended the event will tell you that they were there. I'm expecting somebody to pitch up and say they were in the back of the car when he did all those donuts. I definitely wasn't there, even though I was doing a lot of work in England at the time. I, for some reason, didn't end up going to the event. But what was good for me was I moved over to England in 1996, and I went to live near Pro Drive near Banbury. And I was able just to find out a little bit more about how special that was by those people who were actually there and part of the team over the years. I got to know quite a few people, including Dave Baker, who was Colin's number one mechanic, and just regaling some of the stories is always quite nice to hear about that particular event. But it wasn't just Colin winning, of course. Carlos finished second, and that was 1-2 in the championship. Subaru won the manufacturers. But of course, Richard Burns and Robert Reid were third, and Colin's brother Alistair McCrae with Chris Wood alongside on that occasion. Alistair usually had Dave Senior with him, but on that occasion he had Chris Wood. They finished 4th. And of course, Elvin Evans' very fast father, Gwyndaf Evans and Howard Davis, they finished 6th. I think it was in an RS 2000 that year. So that really set up British rallying, and you know, we all piggybacked on the back of being on the front page of newspapers at that particular time. So that really got me excited about being asked then to do the British Championship in 1996 and getting to meet all these heroes who I'd been watching from afar. And it certainly gave me the inspiration to continue. Very soon after that, I was able to pick up people like Richard Burns, who mentored me, and David Lapworth. But, you know, it played a key part in my motivation to and give me confidence, I suppose, in a way, where I could actually have a go at this myself. This is a young lad from South Armagh who, over the years, rallying was my hobby. I didn't think much more of it than that. So those events of 95 certainly were a big key for me just to progress in the sport and to meet people over those next couple of years that had a big influence in what I was able to do in the sport.
Absolute Rally, the season of 95.
A sea of blue and gold, and I had no idea that I was hankering after a cigarette livery at the time either. My dad was a massive rally fan and also a very sort of passionate Scot, and I inherited both of these things in a rally from a rally point of view quite early on. I was aware of McRae winning, but because I was quite young, it was only in 94 that I began to follow it regularly. And then obviously the way that Colin won the RAC in 1994 completely cemented everything. I seem to recall I pressed my dad for us to go to see it live the very next year, but it never came to pass. So I ended up watching it as closely as was possible in the 90s and buying a hell of a lot of autosports and motorsport newses to keep up to speed with how the title chase was going from a McRae point of view. Because again, back then I was so young that the idea of rooting for anyone else, or at least even seeing the bigger picture as a sport, was quite hard. You know, I was fixated on Impretzers, Boxers, McRae, and everything else, and probably nursed a disliking of Carlos Sainz completely without any reason whatsoever. But that's how things were. And I remember, even as a kid, it seemed that 1995 was a particularly good year for the WRC in terms of intrigue, because you had the turbo gate thing from Toyota, which as a child, I had no concept of understanding the engineering behind it. I just knew that, I remember my dad explaining that more boost equals more power and that kind of thing, and that completely intrigued me as a child, and it continues to today. But it really was just McRae and everything else. I'm becoming completely obsessed with a sport that I'd already enjoyed a lot before, but hopelessly obsessed with it. And then come, November, and when it all came good from a McRae point of view, I don't want to get too personal. It's probably one of the happiest sort of memories of my childhood, of my dad being absolutely overjoyed, completely losing it. And he was a very calm man, and just because this person McRae had won, and it was only, I dare say, a few years later when I realised and started going to rallying myself, how big an achievement it was for a Brit to have won, as for a Scot, but certainly, and how little heritage we have on the global old scene in terms of rallying, and it probably didn't help that then a few years later it became Brit domination, became something almost something of a given. But at the time, that was just me sold there and then.
The Drivers' Championship was now a straight fight between McRae and Sainz, each on 70 points. With Toyota excluded, the manufacturer's title will be fought out between Mitsubishi and Subaru.
On the 22nd of November 1995, Colin McCrae made history. Victory on the Network QRAC Rally confirmed the Scot as the first Briton ever to become World Drivers' Champion. It was a title which hung right in the balance until the 8th and final round in one of the most dramatic seasons of rallying ever.
Righteous! 1995 World Rally Champion.
Seems a bit strange, doesn't it? I think it'll take a while to settle in.
It seems rather fitting the last person who we hear from on this particular two-part special is David Richards from ProDrive, the man, of course, who masterminded what was going on at ProDrive, along with many other people who he talks about in this piece. And our own Jack Bangin sat down with David Richards to talk about 1995.
I have to admit that I'm not a great one for storing memories or looking backwards at all. And sometimes it takes a bit of prompting to remind me of all the things that went on. But I have to say that in the last couple of months, I've been to various functions and people have sort of talked about what happened in '95, and obviously spoken to people, colleagues within ProDrive about it all, and it slowly comes back, and you sort of it was a bit of a blur that year, if I'm honest with you. We never expected to win the championship. It was quite a challenge, and I remember at the start of the year, Subaru saying to me, and meeting the chairman, and he said, no, it's not realistic. We're up against the might of Toyota, and we're just little Subaru. Little did we know what was to unfold in the latter part of the year. So I suppose if I look back at that season, there were lots of sort of small hiatuses, if you like. There was sort of, the early part of the year, which is probably fairly normal, if I'm honest with you, the first half of the year. Then, of course, we had Carlos, and so when we looked like we were starting to get in a good position, Carlos falls off it. Told me it was a bicycle at the time. I subsequently found out it was an enduro motorbike, which wasn't best pleased about, and did his shoulder in, and so we thought that was the end of the game. Then we thought that really was it, and then of course the next stage of the saga was when Toyota were found out to have had that turbocharger breach, and when that came out, that was quite a stunning moment, and that to think that a major company like Toyota could do such a thing. We always work in the grey. I've always told my guys that sort of, I don't mind you push the boundaries to the grey, but never put me in a position where I've got something that's indefensible, and that was clearly indefensible. So that was a sort of a mega moment, if you like, of when Toyota was suddenly put on the sidelines. I suppose that was the point in time when we suddenly thought, wow, this is going to be gifted to us. And then, of course, the challenge as to which driver it was going to be and how that was going to unfold. And I know at the time I was sort of the villain of the piece, if you like, in Spain. That is one of those meetings I do remember quite well, and I remember how that unfolded in Lloret de Mar, that little seaside village that most people go for the holidays. I certainly wouldn't go there now, but thinking back at what happened that weekend, it was the night before we sort of dominated the event, and we were first and second and looking very strong, and it was clear that to win the manufacturer's title we just had to maximise the points. So it was the night before. I remember sitting down with Colin and Jimmy and talking to them about, look, it's we're going to have to call team orders and just get ourselves to the finish, and it never goes down very well, those conversations. Drivers don't appreciate it, but it was something that had to be done. I was fairly robust in what I intended to happen, and of course Carlos wound Colin up a lot, and I think the next morning there was a bit of jibe between the two of them, and like red rag to a bull with Colin, and off he went. And everyone's seen the scenes in that last stage with Nigel Riddle, one of our guys, stood in the middle of the road with John Spiller, the team manager, and then of course the drama in the high street of Lloret de Mar when I insisted that Colin had to do what he agreed to do, and to his credit, and I look back now, and it was we're both young people, and we sort of Colin was obviously still very very volatile, and the discussions we had there, and Jimmy quietly stoically in the background sort of trying to keep the peace between us all, and to his credit, Colin ultimately agreed, and we went, of course, into the final round in UK with equal points, and that was big pressure, to be honest with you. That strangely enough, I was so used to taking pressure over the years, but that, looking at Carlos always thought we biased everything towards Colin, so he had this view that whatever happened, he wasn't going to be able to win. I think that was clearly fundamentally wrong, because everything was equal in the team, and we made even more of an effort to make sure that Carlos saw that as well. So it was quite tense. The atmosphere was very tense in those last 4 days. Carlos sort of drove his usual professional way, and Colin went off like a scolded cat, and some of the times were just sort of extraordinary when you look back at those things. He had a few incidents during the rally. I can't even remember them now. It was all a bit of a blur, and but then of course that scene in Chester at the end of the event. And what strikes me, I look back now, and it's hard to imagine now when you look at the World Championship today, but you look back now, and the crowds lining the forests, the Scottish flags being waved everywhere, the newspapers full of it, not just the sports pages, but the front pages of newspapers. It was like sort of England winning the World Cup, like sort of England in cricket taking the Ashes. It was something of that monumental scale, and anyone who wasn't there at the time will sort of find it hard to imagine, but those of us that were will remember it with extraordinary affection. And at the finish, of course, in Chester, the magic scenes at Chester Racecourse with the team together, and all of us together as well, with Carlos there and Richard there, everybody. It was very special indeed, and the party, Chester, went on a long time, and the party continued for some time afterwards. And I remember going up to Lanark, where he received the freedom of the city, and a big party at the end of the season. And I was reminded the other day, actually, of the party we had at the end of that year. It was actually not far from our base in Banbury at the Heritage Centre in Gaydon, and at the end of the evening we had Colin get up and make a speech, and we all thanked Colin, and then we pulled back the curtain, and we gave him the car that he won the championship in, and it was a very, very sort of that was when Colin was left a bit speechless, I'd say, and that was a special moment. So I guess there's loads of times during that year, 95, when I can look back and reflect on them. I bump into people every day and say, I was there, I saw what happened, and it brings back all the memories.
What about, you mentioned Subaru and the expectations that they had, and not thinking they could take on Toyota, but what were the ProDrive expectations going into that year, David? Because I know you always set yourself lofty goals, and it's one of the reasons why ProDrive has become the success it is, and everything else that you do as well. So what were your expectations going into that year, and was it a year where even though Subaru weren't expecting so much, that you thought maybe there was an off chance that something could be done there?
Well, I think we always set ourselves fairly stringent targets, and you're quite right. We do have sort of aloof expectations, if you like, of what we can achieve. But I think, to be fair, if you're up against the likes of Mike Toyota, we set our goal around winning some events and sort of being there and being competitive. And I suppose middle of the year it was looking like we could over deliver, but we did have a very competitive car, and we had, for my mind, the most competitive driver lineup as well. So yes, we did have some experience there from that point of view.
What about the 8 rounds that season? That must have been quite an unusual aspect as well, because when the start to the season wasn't so good for Subaru, and then the calendar's kind of short as well because of all the rotation that was going on. So that must have added sort of extra pressure as well for that season.
Well, there you go. You're bringing back things to my memory that I can't even recollect. So I'd forgotten all about that, and about how short a season it actually turned out to be. Yes, it's you didn't get many chances to. You get it wrong, and but maybe that played into our hands as well.
What about the sort of the achievement in general for ProDrive? Was 95? Do you think ProDrive's sort of greatest achievement, or where does it rank in terms of that?
I'd say 95 was our coming of age. I'd say that we'd worked very hard to build up the organisation to deliver then. We were quite a a small company when we started with Subaru, and by the time we got to 95, we were sort of maturing, and we were starting to develop it. I was beginning to, so shortly after that, I certainly changed my management style to stand back from things, to broaden our scope into going circuit racing, to doing other engineering things. So it was an opportunity for us to just take us on to the next level, if you like, and it was a springboard, and I'll never forget and always be grateful to the likes of Mr. Kuze, who was the unsung hero of this whole story. Mr. Kuze was the wonderful little Japanese man who was in his sort of 60s when I got to know him first of all, and he was the one who conceived the idea of us all going to the World Championship for Subaru. He was the one that looked after all the relationships in Japan. He was the one who was 100% supported through all the difficult times, through sort of persuading Subaru that this was the right thing to do, getting the budgets, dealing with the sort of all the complications that were thrown at us, and he was there all the time. And if it wasn't for him, this entire Subaru story would never have happened.
On the 22nd of November 1995, Colin McCrae made history. Victory on the Network QRAC Rally confirmed the Scot as the first Briton ever to become World Drivers' Champion. It was a title which hung right in the balance until the 8th and final round in one of the most dramatic seasons of rallying ever.
So that was 1995 through the eyes of the people that were there. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the tales, maybe some of which you knew, and maybe some that you didn't. Some I certainly didn't know, and it's been an absolute joy to listen to some of the stories, as I say, from the people that were there, and also listening, I suppose, to some of my colleagues and friends who shared their tales of what 1995 meant to them. Just I suppose as a bit of a footnote, for me, 1995 confirmed what I knew from pretty much the age of 8, that I wanted to be involved with rallying, and I wanted it to be in every aspect of my life moving forward, and I've been fortunate enough that I can say that now. It's been an absolute joy to be part of the rally community in various ways, whether it's through business, presenting programmes, or indeed competing. I hope this goes some way to maybe inspiring one or two to maybe don the overalls or get out and walk some stages. And if you are a rally fan and you've got friends who are rally fans that perhaps don't listen to podcasts, maybe just put it on for them. Maybe just tap into that emotion that I guess we all felt when Colin was crowned world champion in 1995. Thank you for listening. We'll be back same time, same place in your little podcast hole in the not too distant future.
The Season of 95, an Absolute Rally documentary, produced by Sims Promotions. Spread the word and download the podcast every week. AbsoluteRally.co.uk.